Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've been to see Spencer today.
Yes.
It's been an interesting day of indulgence in the establishment of England. Hasn't it? Because we saw Mothering Sunday before that. And I'm surprised at the number of similarities in all sorts of ways that the films share, actually. Or at least some degree of common ground between them. I was sort of thinking, I said in the podcast on Mothering Sunday, how remarkable it was that a film got me to feel sympathy and sadness for the ruling classes. Once in a day is interesting. Twice feels like a Tory conspiracy. And that's what Spencer's kind of going for. It's directed by Pablo Larraín, who we've done once before on the podcast with Emma, which was last year, I think. Well, yeah, it was, because I think it was COVID.
Yeah, which is a really interesting film.
And we saw it on Mubi, and that was a great film. And we both liked it. And we have both seen Jackie together as well, pre-podcast.
Yes, I think I've seen almost everything he's done now, because I've seen No, I've seen Tony Manero, and then something else, this creepy film about an usher that he did.
Right.
Well,
Jackie, Emma, and this are the only three of his that I've seen. This, I think, is the one I've liked least.
I liked it very much.
Yeah?
Yeah. And actually, I think this is the film of his that I like the most.
Oh, really?
Yes. Because I have an odd relationship with his films. I just think he's not my sensibility, you know. Mm-hmm. So I admire his films, but I always find them like kind of withdrawn or distancing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you remember Jackie, it was a little bit like that.
Sure,
really,
yeah.
You know? Whereas with this film, I felt like, you know, Kristen Stewart is so great, I think, that you really feel for her. Yeah, so she's in this weekend. It's Christmas. It's the weekend where you sense she decides to leave Charles. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It revolves, like Marie Antoinette, around the necklace. Yeah. So Charles, not out of meanness or spite, but just out of carelessness, has bought the same thing, yeah, for his mistress and for her. Yeah. And you get a sense of how she's losing control. She's losing her grip because, yeah, everything is decided for her. She's got no say in her own life. Yeah. And I think Kristen Stewart is so great at communicating that. Yeah. That sense of, you know, of lostness. She makes you empathize with her character. Yeah, that she is going nuts. She's aware that she's going nuts. Yeah, but at the same time, she's behaving perfectly reasonable. Yeah, by her own standards. Yes, she's aware that it's very unreasonable to others. On the other hand, she's doing things that are excessive. She's cutting herself. Yeah, she's kind of bulimic and throwing up food between courses. Yeah, there are all these signs of her great unhappiness that I think are very well communicated.
Although there is a whole element to the film which is you're not sure how real that is, I think. So I should say right from the start, it says on screen at the beginning of the film, a fable based on a true tragedy.
Yes.
That's what it says. So this is set over 3 days in December 91 at Sandringham. It's close to her old home where she grew up, and it's Christmas with the royal family. And it's, I think, very clear that we're not supposed to be taking this as a document of these real 3 days in 1991,
of
right?
Course.
This is, as it says, a fable. We're in her head completely, and she is really losing her grip on reality. And it's funny, when she arrives, she drives to Sandringham at the start, and she gets lost and so on, and she arrives late. And when you see these opening shots of the huge, stately home, I said to you, it's like a Hammer horror. And it was flippant, right? But then later, I thought, no, there's actually something to that, right? It's not a horror film, but it has so many tropes that appear in horror films. It starts off with a journey to a destination. So many horror films do that, the trip to somewhere. You know, the isolated manor in the middle of nowhere. She's trapped constantly. She feels she's being watched. It's all about her paranoia. She gets all these indications that she's being watched. Some of it is clear hallucination, what you see. You know, she tears her necklace because she's feeling so... I mean, it's strings in the background. That's such a classic horror thing, the strings. She tears her necklace in a kind of moment of intensity at dinner. and all the pearls fall into her soup, and she eats and crushes one of them, and then she regurgitates it later. Clearly, we're not being asked to believe that this is real.
No,
the thing
that's...
about cutting her arm, and then moments later, the mark is gone, and it's not highlighted, but you can see there is no mark on her arm.
But then there are, phrases, she's cut herself again.
Yeah, sure. The point is to say, though, that there is the use of horror tropes, horror filmmaking in here to communicate this heightened reality, this psychosis that she's experiencing. Which I think is actually, what started as a flippant comment actually had something to it.
No, I agree. I see it. Yeah, I do see that. Are you really seeing what you're seeing? Is it all in your mind? Like, are these monsters real?
Right.
Right.
The moment that you first see Anne Boleyn show up in a shot. So there's this book about Anne Boleyn that she finds in her assigned room at Sandringham. And she starts reading it. And the moment that she finds the book, I'm thinking, this is quite heavy-handed. The parallel it's drawing between the two of them. And then you see Boleyn show up in a shot, and then it becomes clear that she's imagining her. I mean, obviously, Anne Boleyn's not really there. The moment that she does appear, though, it's just a cut to her, and it's like in that moment in a Ghost film where you cut and there's something there. And it's quite shocking, because I really didn't expect anything like that. That's the first indication, I think, that there is going to be a heightened reality here. And then as it goes on to really emphasise that book and the parallels between her, or that she feels between her and Anne Boleyn, I thought, this is so heavy-handed that I actually kind of respect it. I respect the level of effort it's going to draw this between them.
Yes, I don't know. I mean, so there are parallels made that Henry VIII also gave the same necklace to him and Jane Seymour.
Gave the same gift, yeah, that's right. And that Boleyn was cast as someone who was having an affair, and the affair actually was being had by Henry VIII.
Yes. Though I think the historical record would recount a little bit of a different story. That she was also involved with someone, I think. But anyway, what I found really interesting about the film is that the institution of the monarchy, because it is about the institution and not the people, right? Because actually, in some ways, you are seeing the people being quite kind, might be pushing it, but, trying to be agreeable and so on, right? I mean, even Charles, go with your mother, right? But the institution itself is monstrous, with kind of all the obligations, all the detail, all that surrounds it, that people have no privacy at all, right? So on the one hand, there's a concern with what the journalists outside and the paparazzi might be seeing through the windows, but actually you can't do anything inside the palace that isn't being kind of reported and talked about and dissected by all and sundry. So I think the film is very clever about kind of doing those binary and parallels, kind of, the problem is posited as being outside, but really kind of, what's posited as being outside is really like, the state of being inside. It's a wonderful portrait of somebody losing, in the middle of a nervous breakdown that is caused by not having control over their own life. And I thought Kristen Stewart was just phenomenal, really. I mean, I think it's a truly, truly great performance. So on the one hand, there's an element of impersonation, the tilt of the head, the eyes going up, the voice. But I think it just exceeds it, and there are like some close-ups where I think she's just extraordinary, at kind of communicating her feeling, and also looking both extremely beautiful, I think, but also looking like Diana, which you wouldn't think Kristen Stewart does, So she's kind of like evoking her in a way that is, I think, really quite extraordinary, and that goes beyond impersonation.
The thing about Kristen Stewart's performance is, I think it is really great, but I don't think she's asked to do enough different things.
No, I don't agree. To me, she does, so, I mean, she does, incredible different levels of cracking up. Her body language at the dinner table, extraordinary. The warmth with her children. It's like, one of the characteristics of Diana, but very far from what I associate with Kristen Stewart anyway. You know, the interactions with the Sally Hawkins character, the response,
the sort of handmaiden who she relates to, and feels she can confide in.
Yeah, but who's in love with her, and her response to it. I thought all of those were like quite incredible things that she does, really, and you really sense like at various levels in the film where she's opening up, or when she's completely shut down, or when she's in the process of shutting down, or when she's on the verge of madness, right? Like, kind of, she's communicating all of that, like, almost transparently. I thought it was incredible.
Yeah, she is. I think it's an issue of tone. I don't think the tone change. I mean, maybe that is kind of the point, that there's a feeling of constant intensity to her paranoia that is really only alleviated when she spends time with the boys.
Yes.
When they have that candlelit game with each other in the middle
and
of the
it's
night.
not paranoia when it's real, because the thing is that the film...
Well, all right, psychosis.
The film is telling you that she is under constant surveillance. She's not even allowed to choose the clothes she wears on private occasions. I mean, this is a family gathering. Right? It's not a state dinner or anything. Right, yeah, so kind of,
Yeah, paranoia is not the right word, but you know what I mean. It's an intensity of psychosis that is being evoked almost constantly, and I felt that it lacked variety.
I didn't. I mean, I must say, I did not. And for me, the comparison with the film, the
Mothering Sunday.
Yeah, the Mothering Sunday, is that these are two films that I expected very little of, and that really surprised me.
Did you really expect very little of this? Because I know you said at the start you have the kind of iffy relationship with Pablo Larraín, but I've always had the impression that you at least find things to respect and interest in.
Okay, well that's what I mean. Yeah, I expected it to be interesting.
Right.
Yeah, and I was curious to see what he'd done, but I'd also told you that and I'd forgotten about Emma. But all his other films that I could think of were films that, at best I admired, but I really didn't warm to any of them, right? I mean, one year I even taught No, right? Because No is so interesting. I mean, I love Gael Garcia Bernal, who's the star, and it's all about using the same marketing that you use to sell Pepsi Cola or Coca-Cola to convince the Chilean populace to vote against Pinochet and to vote for democracy. So you think it would be right up my alley, and I still didn't warm to it.
Fair enough.
So I mean, I'm not saying this is his best film, but this is the film of his that I have liked the most.
And it's that emotional openness.
And I think it's Kristen Stewart who makes it so for me. I mean, you feel connected to her, right?
Yeah, you do. You do. You do. Even though for me it is mostly that she's just constantly on the verge of tears.
Well, that's true, yeah. But, I think that is also the character as we remember her, yeah. Always like either withdrawn, yeah, or teary-eyed or lonely, or, all the famous iconic images of her alone, in front of the Taj Mahal, yeah, or in the interview with Shabib, like, with that voice looking up, the soft voice. Yeah, like, I mean, I think, that is...
It must be said, those aren't images that have any meaning to me, because my recollection of her is that I was 9 years old when she died.
Right.
So my recollection of her is as someone who you subsequently learn about as you grow up. And, she's still a constant presence in your life because she's still everywhere in the British press. But, my memory of her is going downstairs to watch TV in the morning, children's telly, and every channel showed the same thing, and going into my mum and dad's room and saying every channel showing the same thing, what's going on, and that's how they found out that she died, because I woke them up.
Yes. Well, no, I remember when she was introduced to the press, that famous shot, before she became media savvy, of her being filmed in front of the kindergarten where she was teaching, and her dress is transparent. Yeah, so she was standing either, I forget whether it was in front of the sun or behind the sun, but actually, the shot went right through her cotton print dress, and you could see all the outline of the legs, and yeah, it was a famous,
Right.
you know, image of her. Kind of Madonna-ish, actually, because she was holding children, but then she had, you know, these incredible legs, and she was wearing the dress that came almost to the ankle, but it was just the transparency against the sunlight. So I remember that. We watched the wedding on television, you know. So we watched the press hound her in the kindergarten doors before she got married. All the stuff about the dress, the wedding dress, and all those images are deployed in the film. Yeah, you have at the end her, you know, wearing the famous Emmanuel dress, you know, coming out of her own house, you know, and kind of in a way you get a sense of like shattered dreams and this like, you know, palatial kind of life that has caused only unhappiness, and that's the fable and the tragedy.
Do you think the film is one note in how it? I don't want to sound combative, but it sides with her.
No, I don't, because I mean, the film is less respectful of the Queen than you're used to, right? Because it's very clear from this film that the Queen does not like her. Yeah. And the Queen, in a way, is her enemy. Yeah, that everything revolves around the Queen, you know, and, you know, she's got no say in anything, Diana, right? But also, you know, the little that you see of the interrelationship between the Queen and Diana, you know, the Queen is always impatient or looking askance or looking sour at Diana, right? Which is not something that you've either.
Well, I think it's very important to keep in mind that, I think at least, the film is absolutely set within Diana's head.
Sure.
You know, we're seeing what she feels and believes and understands.
Yes. But I was going to say that aside from that, the other members of the family that you see them behaving quite well. And I was surprised by how sympathetically Charles was treated. Yeah.
Well, what about the relationship with the staff? This is what I'm thinking about. You know, she, particularly with the head chef, who she kind of has this little sit down with, and he kind of tells her, we're all behind you and we support you and we want you to survive. And when we talk about the other members of the family, it's gossip and we're laughing, but no one laughs about you. And there's this kind of thing that Diana's supposed to have this kind of common touch to her.
Yes, well, that was part of her persona, wasn't it? She did have a common touch.
Common-ish. I mean, it feels silly in the film.
Well,
yeah, she ends up going to a KFC with kids.
Yeah, I don't.
Felt almost parodic.
I mean, no, I don't think it's parodic. I mean, that is the way that she was represented, and that is the way that she represented herself. I mean, on the one hand, it's, you know, it might be ridiculous. I mean, she is the daughter of, you know, the Earl of whatever, Earl Spencer, you know, but certainly, you know, the persona in the press was that. Yeah, she was like really a Sloane Ranger, and she worked in a kindergarten, and, you know, kind of she wasn't too bright. You know, when she went out with the kids, she took them on the log boats in the amusement park, and one of the things that the film says, you know, I'm very middle class. You know, I love Phantom of the Opera and eating KFC, and I'm sure that's not. I mean, that is, you know, kind of.
Well, I'm not really talking about real life though. I'm talking about how it comes across in the film, how the film handles that aspect of her character or her persona. It seems quite silly. And actually, I suppose I would use the phrase again, it's heavy-handed.
I don't know. I mean, really, when you're dealing with royalty, is anything heavy-handed? I mean, you know, so I was coming from it from a slightly different perspective, you know, because I love the use of the clothes, you know, in the palace, actually, and stuff like that. But then I was thinking, oh, the jewels look so fake, right? Like, that tiara is like, you know, made of glass beads, right? Why didn't they rent a real thing? You know, so I think it depends on what perspective you're coming from.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it must.
It didn't feel heavy-handed to me.
Sure. Oh, that's fair enough. It did to me. Another interesting, and maybe, well, this is...
Sorry, before you go, you know what I really disliked?
Yeah, go on.
And I think it's almost the only thing in the film that I really disliked was the little brat who played Prince William.
Oh, what, the kid?
Yeah,
the actor?
It was awful.
Okay.
You know, and a complete ham. And there's a scene at the end where they're driving in the car, and he's constantly looking at Kristen Stewart, wanting to be in the shot, where you see the kid, where you see the Prince Harry character, at the back, and he's doing his thing.
Well,
right?
he's behind the headrest. I couldn't even see him.
No, but a more bratish or Hollywoodish or child actor would have been hamming it up to get to be in the shot, like the one like the guy who played Prince William, and he's not. So that is the only thing I really dislike, the casting of that actor.
Right. Do you think the kid who played Harry was all right?
Yeah, I did.
I quite liked him.
Yes, I liked him.
Although I think it's interesting that basically the only, with the exception, I suppose, of the one with Sally Hawkins, the only other relationship she has that is meaningful and that she feels kind of comfortable in is the one with her kids.
Yes.
She really connects with them, really relates to them, and actually, I really like the thing with the scales at the end. So there's this thing about the scales. There's this seat that you sit on, old-fashioned scales at Sandringham, and apparently, I have no idea if this is based on reality.
It is.
It's a tradition that you go there and you get weighed, and then after Christmas you get weighed again. And you have to have put on £3 or 3 stone, £3. Yeah, 3 stones a bit.
Otherwise, you haven't enjoyed yourself.
Exactly, that's how much you've enjoyed yourself. And so she does that, and she feels quite pressured into it because being weighed as a woman is just one of those things that people are looking at, And then when she leaves, she runs off with the kids, and she weighs herself with the kids on her. So she weighs like 17 stone after that, and that's a really nice way of bookending that. Finishing that off that she's enjoyed herself so much she's got her kids with her. That's so important to her, and that's really nice. But I thought maybe it to some degree speaks to her kind of mental state that she's comfortable with children and having this childish relationship, whereas with the adults in the house there is no connection. Actually, she's being watched like a child.
Yeah, I mean,
that's how it makes her feel.
Yeah, she's being watched like a child. She's considered a problem child. She's conscious that she is being a problem. Yes, her constant lateness, and so on, which can be seen as like a sign of disrespect to the Queen and therefore the Crown. Yeah, and which is often perceived as like really a very small demand in relation, to the sacrifices that other people make, like soldiers, which are kind of, it is, something that's brought into play. So it's seen as being willful and selfish. And
it's an interesting opening to the film with regards to soldiers, because you start off with these shots of the Sandringham estate, and the soldiers are bringing in military crates, right? This is like M1A1 rifle on the side and things. You're going, what the fuck is going on here? And it's only when you get into the house and everything's finally opened up, you realise lobsters, cakes, drink. That's what this all contains. But it's a military operation. It's running all this at the start.
That's right. And I think you're meant to see the whole thing as being run like a military operation. Yeah. I mean, and in fact, it's not the Queen the head of the armed forces.
I think, like, technically, yeah. And the Timothy Spall character, who's kind of he runs the Sandringham estate or something a bit like that.
He's brought in for extra security.
That's right. And he's kind of running the operation. He's a former Black Watch, as he explains to Dan at one point, and that's one of the times when the theme of being watched is very apparent and very explicit. Like, that's his job as a military man, to oversee her.
Yes. I mean, I don't know, because I am like somebody who's very interested in history and royalty and royal biography, and I'm an archetypal kind of gay queen in that regard. And the tragedy also is that she's not interested in power, and she's not very clever, right? So all she's got is her feelings, right? If she were smarter, she would play the game better. Yes, I mean, she would show up on time for dinner and then do her own thing later and manage to carve out both, an interesting private life for herself and be able to do things that she wouldn't normally be able to do outside of that context and so on. But, she's all about her feelings, and her,
acting out.
Yeah, and acting out, and, in a kind of a very 80s Valley Girl way, actually. Yeah, where you're the center of the universe and it is all about your feelings and you can't see a way beyond that, right? So I think kind of, the film is interesting in that way because, she's very sensitive and she's very honest and so on. But also, she's not worldly and she's not clever.
I want to bring up, I think what's a minor point, but an interesting one, and it's another comparison with Mothering Sunday. And it's that in the Mothering Sunday podcast, I talked about the aspect ratio, and it's a non-standard aspect ratio, and I estimated it was 14:9. And then I saw this, and I thought, is my aim really off, or have I just seen the same thing? Because it'd be very unusual to see that twice in one day. And so I looked it up, and I was off with the estimate. It's 15:9, apparently, which is not quite widescreen, but it's this non-standard aspect ratio, and they're both in that.
Okay.
And
well, that makes sense to me, because it's not 4:3, but it's a more intimate ratio.
There's something that there's a kind of slight squatness to the image compared to what you expect. I think it really works for both films, and I wonder whether it's going to be something that we see more of. It just seems so unusual to see the same thing twice in one day that I haven't seen before.
No.
I don't remember seeing before.
Yeah, so well, it works.
Yeah, I agree, and I think both films actually look astonishingly beautiful.
They do.
I really love the way this one looks, and it has its very heavy use of wide angle. That's again, it's something that conveys psychosis quite effectively, and that's another little bit of a horror thing. The one real big difference here is that she escapes and gets a happy ending.
Well, except we know she doesn't.
Well,
but
it does. I mean, by the end, it seems like it's almost set in a parallel reality. She runs off with the kids and just sets up her own little private life in London.
Well, but the thing is that the film relies on our knowledge also of what we know happens later, right? So you know that it's a brief respite. That this moment of triumph and so on.
I'm not sure if that's. I do get what you mean, but the thing is, the film is such an obvious fantasy. Not just the fact that it tells you so at the start. That is it not escapism at the end? This wishful thinking of imagine this happy ending for Diana.
No, because we know what the ending was. I mean, the film kind of touches on the Diana we know from the media, right? On events of her life that we recognize, on the childhood. That we also recognize, the relationship with Charles and Camilla that we know of. The Queen is there, the corgis are there. I mean, I don't think. I mean, if it was going to be a fable in the sense that you say, it would be, very different.
But it puts this very highly stylized spin on everything, takes us into this, as I say, psychosis, these imaginings, these hallucinations, and so on. To the point where you do start to question how much is real within the context of the film, how much is imagined, and so on. That's why I think for me, I felt like it's giving into escapism at the end. And so,
no, I didn't feel that way. I mean, I think it was like, it might be worth exploring the ending, because we know it's the ending to the film, but it's not the ending to her story. The ending to her story we know. And actually, I think this is also what makes the film so interesting and evocative, really. Because we know she was on the verge of cracking up. The film has a kind of a Marilyn Monroe thing, that it really is all about her beauty, her pain, her inability to find fulfillment and meaning, and so the film leaves us on a high, but it leaves us on a high when we know that will not be the end of the story. And it's part of what makes it, the tragedy, really. Yeah, the film is not the triumph of Diana. It's, fable and tragedy, right? So...
a fable based on a true tragedy. Things that are based on can divert. I think it's a film that is not interested in the end of her life. It's a film that indulges in, at the end, it indulges in the pure happiness of this moment, and gives us that to leave on.
Yes, but that's not divorced from what we know. I mean, everybody knows what happened to Diana, right? So the sense of her being hunted and pursued and so on, will exacerbate. That's the tragedy. I mean, this is just, kind of a punctuation mark on a story that is to be continued and that we know, right? So I think where the film offers like a valuable insight is that it puts you inside her head, for this moment, which is a kind of a transitional moment. It's a moment, where there's an opportunity of escape. But actually, what's rendered really tragic is that we know she won't.
I also want to talk about the music a little bit. I think the music, I briefly mentioned strings. Music is certainly something that contributes to the sense of psychosis, if not outright the sense of horror that I've been mentioning. The music's by Johnny Greenwood, and when his name came up in the credits, I went, "Oh, that explains it," because there's this combination of sort of classical sounding string arrangements, and then a trumpet that occasionally comes over the top, blaring jazz, and it's kind of out of time and out of sync. And it made me think about Homeland, the TV series with Claire Danes. The opening of every episode of Homeland, the theme music, is this weird, off-kilter, jazzy number that was also used in the soundtrack, I think, quite heavily in the first season or two, and then it stopped doing that. But it was all about Claire Danes' character works for the CIA, and she's this kind of genius, and she's relentless at tracking this guy who's come back from the war, and they think maybe he's she suspects that he's been turned by the enemy. And there's this strand in it about her mental illness. She's bipolar, and when she refuses to take her meds, that's when she's more creative. It's kind of a fairly common trope of mental illness in film and TV, that the meds cloud your judgment, so you go off them, and then you start to behave irresponsibly and dangerously, but that's where you hit your genius, and that's when this jazz would come in. And Spencer is certainly not doing that heavily with mental illness, although I think it's quite clear that Diana is depressed, and I took seriously and as real the talk of her cutting herself, at least within the context of the film. Don't know about real life. And the way the jazz comes in, it's always heightening her psychosis in those moments. It's something that the music is something that builds up and builds up and builds up, and then jazz starts to come in over the top, and that's when she's at her most frantic. It was unexpected. I suppose I didn't know what to expect of the film, but I didn't expect that. I thought it worked extremely effectively in heightening the mood.
I think the film also has incredible images. That image of Diana with that, incredible white and gold, fluffy long dress, bent over the toilet bowl. So that image of this great wealth and beauty and delicacy and the toilet is very powerful. So, and I think the film is full of images like that, actually.
That kind of contrast the elegant with the crude.
Well, that tell you that, within this great wealth and elegance and so on, there is a physical, tortuous, kind of vomiting out of things that, you can't quite express or contain. That it's unbearable. And that it kind of comes out.
Physical is the word.
No,
it's a very tactile film.
Yeah. It's also, I think, very worked through on the symbolic level, right? So, basically, you're meant to see Diana as some kind of pheasant, that's beautiful and has colourful plumage, but actually can't fly away, and is just basically there to fulfill her function and, have the beaters come and take her out and be shot. Which is, and
she says to the pheasant at one point, she's talking to a pheasant, if you're in the city, you should go to London, because they'll look at you there and they'll marvel at your plumage. But here, they'll just shoot you. Which is, it's how she feels.
Yeah.
It's pretty on the nose.
It is, and in some ways it's what happens to her later in Paris, right? Chase, and... So I think there's a lot to like. And really, the most extraordinary thing about it is really Kristen Stewart.
Well, they're talking about Oscar nomination as well. They might.
Well, I think it is the most astonishing and unexpected performance I've seen this year. Yeah.
I was thinking she's obviously someone who's had her own experience of being kind of shredded by the press. And I've no doubt that feeds into her performance here.
Yeah, and her understanding of the role.
It does feel actually quite personal. A little bit like Red Sparrow did with Jennifer Lawrence, because that was after the nude photos leak. It wasn't just her, it was a lot of people. But she was obviously just about the most famous in that hack. And that was a film about to a degree at least, about her reclaiming her image of her body and her power in it.
Yes.
That was more potent. I think this is a little less direct about that, but I think it's a factor.
And it's a truly great performance, and I think a revelation. Yeah, so let's wrap it up.
I'd say it was my least favourite of the three that I've seen. I thought Jackie was terrifically interesting, and mind you, I haven't seen it since it came out of the cinema, but I remember being really blown away by it, and really, I felt so connected to the space that Jackie Kennedy was in during, set around her husband's death, obviously, and Emma was a really surprising and beautiful film that we saw.
Yeah.
This I did find less, but Kristen Stewart is great, and it is a good film.
Yeah, I think this is the one that I've. I'm not saying it's the best one, but it's the one that I've liked the most. So I highly recommend, and yeah, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.